right? So we should proceed.
This things around tools. I'm confusing these two.
It's running. I'm waiting for someone to confirm that it's running, but yeah, it says it's streaming, so you should be good.
So do I need to wait, or?
Do you want me to
I don't think
or
so.
something? What do we go to?
If you want,
Wave to
you
the
can
people.
put up a review request for that and have review it right away.
No, you're streaming. You're good. You're live.
And I'll edit to
Good.
the key.
Afternoon, everyone. Just so you know, this is probably not going to be a very long talk, because it's basically going to be a short overview of what of my project the last year. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Uiterwijk. I work rather as software engineer for the cockpit team, but have been working on the Fedora authentication system for quite some time now. So first I'm going to give you a short overview of what Fedora is and how it came to be, what I currently have and what I'm going to do, and how you could help me with improving Fedora. So first, does any of you know what Fedora stands for? Or could you take a guess?
Federated something.
So, Fedora stands for Federated Open Authentication Provider. Because basically, what it does is, it's a authentication system that's used, for example, or also in Fedora, that's where it originally came from, to log into all of our applications. So, who uses it? Well, all of you who have such a badge have probably used it. Did you ever see this screen? So, this is what Fedora looks like to most of the users. So, you also recognize this screen, right? That happens when you log into a website that is not run by your infrastructure team. So, just to give you a short view of what Fedora looked like, this was 1 year ago when I started Fedora. If you would look now, the login page looks like this. The approval page looks like this. Who can see the differences in the user interface?
Remember approval for never.
Yes, so that's basically the issue why I'm giving this talk. I've been doing a lot on Fedora, on the back end and everything, but there's not much difference for the users, so that's why I'm now trying to give you a short overview of what I did, actually, so you don't think it's been doing nothing. So first, the 3 parts of the name. Why it was
Preservation.
That was not
Edit. That's
That was a very short one. So, first, the open part is because it's all open source and everyone can work on it. Authentication because it's an identity provider. Please note that this is not for authorization. So that means that, for example, in the Fedora infrastructure, we have group information, and that's provided by Fedora, but then it's up to the application to decide what to do with the group information and which permissions to grant to the user. So it's not authorization, only authentication. And federated because in a lot of applications, when you try to authenticate, the application itself asks for the username and password, and that's what this does not. The application you try to log into redirects you to Fedora, which then authenticates you and redirects you back. So does anyone have questions up to this point? Because this is something you really need to understand before, or, okay? So, I started this project in, during the Futkin law rounds in January 2013. So the fun thing is, I was not at Futkin. I was like the only one of Fedora if I was not at there, and I decided to do something because I was kind of bored by then. So maybe some of you might know, but before this we had OpenID inside FAS, inside the Fedora account system itself. But that was broken on multiple levels, and my first attempt was to make that work, but that didn't really work out because it was very integrated and not very flexible at all. So then I started the project as FAS OpenID because it was OpenID provider for the Fedora account system. So back then it was named FAS OpenID. Well, when we had that, we were thinking like, but we currently have all of these applications written in a lot of different frameworks, which we need to hook up to the Fedora account system. And basically all of them had a lot of performance issues because every single application hit the Fedora account system on every single request. And that's not really what we wanted. Also, they had to touch FAS itself, so we couldn't really have another external application that also used FAS login because it needed access to our Fedora account system. Also, the way we did single login between applications was by using just the same domain name and the same name for the cookie, so that basically the session kind of transferred over to other services and not really. Especially once we started with Flask and Turbo Gears 2, so that's why we were thinking like, well, let's use OpenID for basically everything. So currently, or to do that, we needed to have an identity provider, which I built as FAS OpenID. For Flask, for example, we were using Flask FAS, which I made a drop-in replacement named Flask FAS OpenID. Since then, basically all of our applications have moved to using OpenID, except for Mirror Manager, which is currently in a rewrite, Body, which is being rewritten, and Wiki, which we are going to upgrade later this year. Am I missing anything? I don't think so. I think this is all that we still need to move. So, version 1.0 was released on March 5th, and it was not that big, but it had some issues, like it had only fast authentication, and people started asking to add persona to it, and we started having issues because the session cookie we used to store your authentication became more than 4 kilobytes because we also stored group information in there. And I don't know if any of you know this, but when you try to set a cookie to a browser that's more than 4 kilobytes, the browser silently drops it.
Oh.
So
What's Persona?
Persona is an authentication system that was built by Mozilla, which is based on email addresses only. Have you used badges?
Yeah.
And the export badges button there?
I know about it, but not use.
Okay. Well, it's another authentication system based on email addresses. So for these things, especially the session cookie thing, I needed to rewrite because the Flask session plugin only had cookies. So came along Fedora 2.0. Well, kind of Fedora, because I added more identity providers, namely Persona, but at that time that was just like, it happened to be in the same code base, but they were not integrated at all. And the modularity for authentication modules was very far stretched. Like the complete authentication or the session stuff, etc., was all in the authentication module. And I used the new session system, which stored sessions in cookies or in the database, but maybe some of you noticed that at some times you would try to log in and it threw you back to you will be redirected to this page when an application tries to log you in. That was mainly because it didn't work well with that session system, because it... So then came along Fedora 3.0, which is a little, about 2 months old, I think, which was a complete rewrite. And as you can see, it now has quite a lot of more files, but at least the different parts are very easy to maintain and also very easy to contribute to. So now I have a bunch of authentication modules against which you could authenticate. Though in Fedora we only use FAS. I can also authenticate against LDAP and Kerberos and something called Sylvia, which I'll come to in a minute. And now we have OpenID, we have Persona, OpenID Connect, and SAML. So currently within Fedora we have everything based on OpenID, but we are thinking about moving to SAML because that gives us some more flexibility, security, and single logout, which is requested by a lot of people. So what I'm now trying to add to Fedora is a user panel where you can log in and then manage your approvals, because as I showed you in the beginning, I now added the system where you can say remember approval for the site for 3 or 7 days. And someone also asked me if I could add an option to say remember forever, and I already answered, well, if I would do that now, you would have no way to revoke that permission afterwards. So I'm planning to add a user panel where you can revoke that after adding it. If anyone has more ideas for authentication modules or providers, I will be glad to add them. Well, as said, we're trying to add single logout now. And we're also going to add multi-factor authentication, so that also needs a lot of work inside Fedora. Also, the reason why I'm making it more flexible is because there's been more people interested in deploying it. For example, we're deploying it at GNOME. ServNet is currently busy with deploying it, and there's some other companies which I'm not allowed to talk here, but there's some other big companies also switching to Fedora right now. So WebSilva, which I just said, is basically Smart-Based authentication, which we might or might not deploy within Fedora. And the reason we did, or I added this, is basically because it's a smart card based system, so you have a physical token for authentication, and it's completely open source, which, as far as I know, is one of the few open source smart cards implementations. So basically, so far I've had 3 major or 2 rewrites of my complete code base. I'm still busy actively developing it and actually now talking with other people to integrate it into, for example, free IPA maybe, or at least we're cooperating with them, and it's getting more widespread, so it should become more stable. So if you want to help, always, I'm happy to hear ideas for different systems. Please test it as much as you can. Also try penetration testing or security testing or whatever. Please don't do that in the production Fedora instance, but set up your own so you don't break our servers.
Is there a test instance in?
Yes, there's a test instance, and you can also, there's a very small document in the repository saying exactly how to set it up yourself. Feel free to browse the code as well. It's on GitHub/Fedora/Fedora. And if you have any patches, feel free to submit them.
If you're gonna penetration test our testing instances, though, let us know first.
Yeah. So if you tell us you can do it, but otherwise, please set your own server up. It's very easy to set up. So, are there any questions, suggestions?
I'm using Fedora for Copper, and people are asking for using the group, so they can have a group interface, and all the people in the group can build in a specific Copper project.
Right. So
What Fedora can do for me or not, or
well, Fedora already provides you the members or the groups a user is a member of in FAS. So
so I request it the same way as I do time zone right now.
Yes.
So, yeah.
There's an extension, Python OpenID Teams, which does exactly that. So basically you just add that to your request, saying I want to know if the user is in any of these groups, or I want a list of all the user groups. And when the user comes back, you will have a list of FAST groups that he is a member of.
Is there somewhere the list which of all the attributes which I can request from the FAS?
Yes, there is.
You can get that programmatically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
And you do have to be careful because cookies have limits on their size, and we have actually hit that limit when we've requested all groups.
Dennis Gilmore is
Dennis
very good at
Gilmore
that.
especially has definitely hit the limit. If your application requests all groups for the user, the cookie will be too big, and some of his groups will not be present, and therefore he will probably end up not being able to use it in some way.
If you try to set a too big cookie, your browser will just reject the cookie or
Okay.
ignore it.
So it will be logged out if it tries to log in.
Can you enhance the authentication part to authorization as well? So I can say, okay, is this user member of this group?
Yeah, so as I said, you can request that. It is already in Fedora. And if you ask it the groups the user is a member of, you will get them. But then it's up to you to decide whether or not to allow them to add any specific Copper or whatever.
Oh, but you said that I can require
You can
a
request.
list of the groups in which the user is,
Yes.
which for Dennis Gilmore will not work.
No, that's if you try to store everything, so including user information in groups, in a cookie. The cookie will be more than 4 kilobytes. But if you try to store, for example, one cookie with the groups and one cookie with the rest of the user information, that should work.
Yeah, okay, good.
So the cookie problem is not strictly related to Fedora.
No, that's just
Because the protocol will give the
yes.
list of groups to the application without using the cookie. So it's
Yes. The
That's
protocol
how
will
you
give the
decide
full.
to store that information
Yeah.
once you've processed it in your app.
Yeah, so it's just
Okay.
the application side that you need to take this into account.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or suggestions, remarks?
Could you elaborate a little bit about your further plans, especially about Kerberos single sign-on with a ticket, just for the people who weren't in the room when I asked before? I mean, when you plan to merge patches which adds a single sign-on, so user can sign on into the Fedora without typing username and password.
You mean Kerberos tickets?
Yeah.
That's planned for the release of next week, Wednesday, I think.
Okay. Thanks. Just I'm asking because you know people who weren't in this room couldn't.
Right. Yeah. So I'm trying to do regular releases, though that doesn't always. Sometimes they still doesn't like it.
So you're gonna start working on that this Thursday? Is that what you said? I'm sorry. I'm typing in the same thing.
I'm trying to get the release out on Wednesday.
Okay, and is that gonna allow Kerberos tickets?
Is that gonna?
Yeah, it's gonna allow Kerberos tokens on your
Yes.
device? Okay, cool.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Well, thanks for your attention.
Were you wanting to talk about WebSilva? Were you wanting to talk about WebSilva?
Well, I was planning on, but as I already explained, basically it's a smart card based system, and I was planning on bringing some cards here, but that didn't really work out, so I had to skip that part of the presentation basically, because otherwise I'd be like, you've got this awesome new thing, but you just can't use it because I don't have any cards. And I think that, I mean, I could show it to you if you want to, but you can't use it yet. So do you want to see?
We've got 6 minutes. Why don't you just show us it in action? Then everyone will want to come to next year's block when you have the cards and have them working.
Yeah.
You have said that it's smart card based. Does it mean X509?
No.
So it's just certificate based or something else?
No, it's something else. It's a completely custom thing.
Wow. Okay.
Well, not completely custom. It's based on work by IBM, but a completely custom implementation because they had specific licenses that we could not reuse. Let's see if I get network.
I think you have to use another Wi-Fi.
No, I've got network. So let's
If people want to test this hardware, will they be able to request it from you after the conference?
say again.
If people want to test this hardware, will they be able to request it from you after the
Yes.
conference?
So I will. We have gotten in, I think, about 50 cards of them, but they came in like one day after I left on the plane. So if you want to, you can send me an email and I'll see what I can do. And just for the records, for what you can use, you can either use a normal smart card reader to use it or a phone with NFC. But I don't have that with me, so that I can't show you that. Unless Toshio has his with him.
Out the phone. Just another time out. Or
Does it have Wi-Fi?
it does. I believe it's on right now.
Let's try. Oh, yes, it should be. Yeah, he already has it on his phone because we've had an internal pilot of this for the last, I think, month or so. Because that's when I was still hoping to get the cards in time. So, start the process. I didn't want to pay the money for a test instance, that's why I gave me certificate 1. So I got a QR code which I just scanned. And for some reason didn't work. It's not connecting.
It's not yeah, it's completely connected. I haven't seen the corner.
Say again?
I thought that the picture is not complete, but it is.
No, it's just a bug in the application, I think.
We had this
Or-
trouble the other day where it was waiting, but it wouldn't connect on the phone.
Yeah, so it seems like the phone just won't connect, and I'll just use my local test client.
Yeah, it must be something about the system here and how we're going through the.
So I've got a command line client as well, which I'm working on getting a GUI, but cross connected. So it just authenticated me with the details on this card. Do you have your card with you?
Yep. Did we start to try and flash it or something though? And
Did you?
I don't remember what the status of the card was.
Let's see. Ah, sure. No, that doesn't have it. So it does work, but just not with that part.
You said.
It's done.
So, as I said, we are thinking about deploying this in Fedora production, and then maybe see about how we can get these cards to contributors, because it's a second factor that is very user-friendly to use, I think.
How much does it cost to make a card for somebody?
That depends, but if you produce them in large enough quantities, I think it's about $50 into the card.
Okay.
Though for the first generations, I've got a sponsor for them. So, thanks for your interest.
Wait, did you say $50 or $50?
50 cents.
Oh.
Why did you say $50? That would be very expensive for.
I'm just transcribing, man. Don't kill the messenger. I correct myself also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you once again.
Cool. Thanks, Pat.